Welcome, everyone. My name is Louisa Lambrix, and I am a representative from Algonquin College on the ETC, the Ontario Educational Technology Committee. And just a little bit of quick information about the ETC. The Educational Technology Committee basically has representatives from all of the Ontario colleges, and we meet regularly. We stay in touch to discuss technology-enhanced teaching and learning. And we do things like organize these regular webinars, which have been quite successful. We also organize a yearly conference. And in terms of this year's conference, we'll have to stay tuned, given this sort of COVID-19 era we're living in, what is going to take place. But stay tuned in terms of the conference, and if there's any updates on if we're having a conference this year, we'll certainly let you know. But what you see on screen right now is a list of the sessions that we're offering this winter. And we offer fall and winter webinar sessions. And I also, well, first of all, I will place a plug in for our next session, which is about integrating virtual reality in higher education. So that one's going to happen on, my eyesight's terrible, November 12th at 12 p.m. So be sure to register for that one. Here's a link to our website. I'm sure you've been to this website to register, but this is where you can go to get more updates and information about what we do as a committee, as well as our upcoming webinars and information about the Advancing Learning Conference. You do have an opportunity to volunteer to be a facilitator of a webinar. So if you have an idea that you'd like to share, and you can present by yourself or with colleagues, feel free to put in a proposal. And it's really a great experience. It's a lovely thing to have on your resume. So highly encourage you to put in your proposals. So there's the web address. And I saw that Jenny put into the chat box a link to our EdTech Ontario website, and you'll find a link to the facilitator sign up on that site. One last thing, we have a webinar mailing list. So that's another opportunity for you to sign up to our mailing list, and we can also give you some advance notice about when our next webinar takes place, as well as information about our yearly conference. So that's all I'll say at this point. I'm going to turn things over to our very capable presenters. So take it away.
I guess it helps if I turn my phone on first. Okay, so let me pop up the slide here. So hopefully everybody is here so they can learn a little bit more about OER, or Open Educational Resources. And as Louisa mentioned, to get started, we are doing a group facilitation. So if you don't always feel comfortable facilitating by yourself, feel free to bring others along, because it's definitely a lot of fun. So yes, today we are going to be talking about open educational resources and how the time for this in our COVID pandemic, I'm not even sure that this is the old norm, the new norm, what it is now, but it's the way things are. Sharing OER in these times is definitely a good thing to do. So I will keep going here. So as we mentioned, there are 4 of us. I am Tricia Bonner. I'm a learning technology facilitator with Loyalist College, which means I basically support everything to do with teaching and learning when it comes to technology. And I was fortunate to be part of the OE Fellowship Program in 2018 through eCampus Ontario. So hopefully I can share some of that experience with you today. So I see Paula's next on the list. Do you want to introduce yourself, Paula, before we get going?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tricia. I'm Paula Demacio. I'm a faculty member in the Center for Teaching and Learning at Centennial College. And I'll be jumping in later on in this presentation. So I'm glad to be here with everyone. Passing it over to Jenny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenni Hayman, Chair of Teaching and Learning at Cambrian College. formerly with eCampus Ontario as the OER project manager for Ontario. So that was a pretty fun job and very relevant to today's talk. But it's good to see you. And I'm passing it over to Shauna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Roche, and I'm an e-learning coordinator in the Lawrence Kinlan School of Business at Fanshawe College, and I'm also a professor there as well.
Okay, thanks everybody. I just realized I didn't turn my camera on to say hello, just so that I think my picture's up there, but forgot to turn that on. I will turn it off as we get going, just so that it hopefully doesn't interfere with the presentation at all. So let's kind of get going. So OER can be a very expansive, or is a very expansive topic. But for today's session, we are going to focus pretty much on the following. We're going to do a quick overview of open educational resources. We are going to look at how you can identify when and where to might fit into your teaching and design, how you find high quality and suitable OER, and then using OER as activities or assignments within your courses for with your students. And then we will hopefully allow at the end, if we don't talk too much, some Q&A. But in the meantime, then, if you do, we will be monitoring the chat. So if you do have a question, please feel free to pop it in there. So I'm going to flip my camera back off here for just a second. There we go. All right, so just a quick poll here. Just give me a second to put that poll up. I am hoping I can do this. Sorry, this is somewhat new to me. Unfortunately, with these, you can't poll, or you can't create a poll in advance. Have you used? I tried to do this earlier. All the things you have to learn. Okay, let's start that poll and see how familiar everybody is. Okay, so that was pretty quick. Looking at the poll results here, does that mean everybody can see those? It looks like the majority of you are familiar with OER, so I guess that means I don't have to go ahead with my introduction. No, I'll still go ahead with my introduction. So let's go back there. It's great to see that many people are using them, and hopefully we can come up with a few new ways to use them. But before we do get started, we just want to kind of give a quick overview. Oh, thanks, Jenny, for dropping the slides in there. We do want to give a quick overview of what open educational resources are, especially in the context of what we're going to be talking about today. So I don't think anybody would question, or at least anybody within this group would question, that technology definitely holds possibilities. And it has certainly allowed us to expand our educational systems and opportunities as instructors and as learners. Our recent experience with COVID has proven just how adaptive we can be when it comes to technology. And technology has allowed us as instructors to share our knowledge with our students pretty much anywhere in the world. And the learning materials that we are using can also be disseminated to those same students at little or no cost. And that's what we're going to focus on for the remainder of this. And essentially, for most of us, finding information for our students and ourselves is not really anything new online. How many times have we searched for some sort of information, whether it's a video, a podcast, resources to support some sort of an argument? My husband often jokes now that nobody can be that Cliff Clavin. I might have dated myself there, but that know-it-all anymore, because we can simply challenge anybody with the push of a button. So, open educational resources, what are they? Well, there are many definitions for open educational resources, but simply for this, they are materials for teaching and or learning that are either in a public domain or have been released under a license that allows them to be freely used, changed, or shared with others. And you'll see here a couple of, so there's a definition from Spark and also a definition from UNESCO. And I'm sure you could find a variety of definitions every time you look it up. But this is the definition that we're going to be following. So how are OER materials different from other online materials? Well, there's often confusion over the meaning of open and other available resources for teaching and learning. And there are many so-called free resources that can be utilized for education, including websites, videos, documents, podcasts, and I'm sure the list can go on and on. However, these resources are pretty much limited in how they can be shared, and in most cases, they can't be changed. For example, I'm a registered early childhood educator, and we have the College of ECEs, which provides some great educational resources, but we are not able to adapt them in any way, shape, or form. And we also use the Ministry of Education website. Again, the resources, the videos, the information there cannot be adapted. So using these resources, it would be entirely possible for me to create a course that would be considered zero textbook costs, but this is not the same as actually using an open textbook. And again, something we'll look at a little bit more. So this next slide happens to be one of my favorites. This is adapted from eCampus Ontario, but it really does highlight what we mean by free. And essentially there's three types of free. We have free as in kittens, and that is, you know, where your neighbor says, my cat just had kittens, and here you can have one, they're free. Of course, kittens are adorable, so you decide you're going to take one. And while the upfront cost is free, there are hidden costs over time. The kitten's going to need food, it's going to need a place to sleep, visits to the vet, maybe somebody in your family is allergic, and now all of your allergy medication bill goes through the roof. And so these are kind of like library licensed resources. They appear free at the onset, but you may end up paying a lot over time. Then we have free as in beer. You walk into a party, somebody offers you a beer, says, here you go, it's free, no hidden costs. But there are only a couple of things you can do with that beer. You can either drink it or not. And this is sort of like the example that I used with the ECE. You can assign those free web content, videos, resources. You can assign them and you can find them online. And you can either use it or not use it, but you can't change it. And then finally, there's free as in speech. This is not only without cost, but it has freedoms and permissions associated with it. And of course, there's limits to those freedoms, but you also have limited possibilities. And this is the type of open we're talking about today. So there's some things to be, or for something to be considered open education or a resource, it has to be free of cost, it has to be free of barriers to access, and others have permission to use them openly. Generally, this is by way of an open license. And it would be hard to talk about OER without talking about the 5 R's of open as defined by David Wiley. And these include the retain, which is the right to make, own, and control copies of the content. We can reuse it, which is the right to use the content in a wide variety of ways. We can revise it, which is the right to adapt, adjust, modify, or alter any of the content itself. We can remix, which is the right to combine the original or revised content with other materials to create something new. And we can redistribute, which is the right to share the original content, your revisions and your remixes with others. I cannot refer to open resources without discussing Creative Commons licensing. Creative Commons is a nonprofit organization that provides free licenses to people who want to make their work available to the public. It is important to note, however, though, that CC materials are not free of copyright. The creator of the work doesn't lose their copyright, but instead they choose to share their work under certain conditions. These combinations of licenses determine what can be done or not done with the materials without having to seek permission from the original creator. So this image here shows the level of possible permissions that can be applied to any content or piece of work. The bottom is the most restrictive, and indicates that the material can be used with attribution, but it cannot be adapted in any way, nor can someone profit from the use of that material. The top license is the least restrictive, and it allows a user to use the material without giving any attribution or credit to the original author, and it can be adapted in any way. And as you can see, there are many combinations of licensing here that can be applied, and we could spend an entire hour discussing just these licensing options, but my colleagues wouldn't have time to share their information. So I'm going to stop here, and then I think Jenny's going to take over, and unless there's any questions, I'll hand it over to Jenny. I think it's Jenny's next. I'm not sure.
Yes, yeah, right on. Thank you, Tricia. Hi, everyone. So what I want to talk about are the pathways that we use as educators to decide what resources we're going to use for our courses. I think use of adding OER into the mix of how we think about resources is probably not as difficult as we might think. Especially at small scale. So just to talk through, and I had this conversation with my own faculty members about choosing resources for January. OER is becoming a very bigger conversation, and we just have our student leaders coming into the conversation in Cambrian as well around the cost of resources and what's happening with COVID and student concerns. So it's good timing, and that's why we think it's good to talk about today for sure. And so just want to talk about where OER might fit in the scheme of things and how you currently choose resources for your courses. I know that when I'm looking for resources, it's kind of a constant process. I'm always on the scout for new and better resources for my teaching. And typically that starts with the learning outcomes. So if you've got a course outline and you've got a series of learning outcomes and maybe learning objectives that are even kind of smaller scale, there's lots to think about in ways, how does this resource line up with my learning outcomes? Typically, I just start Googling it, understanding that I happen to know where to find open resources as well. And then the types of resources, what am I looking for? A major resource? Am I looking for a new textbook for my course? Complete big resource with all the teaching tools that are helpful, slides, quizzes, practice opportunities for students. There are some really great foundational resources for courses like sociology, biology, chemistry, fully open textbooks with all those extra resources. And then I also will think about supplemental resources, those additional readings, links to websites. But when I start to think about OER, then I start to think about some of the student practices, and Shauna's going to talk with us about that as well. And then OER can begin for you as small wins. For example, it's very close to January in the scheme of things. If you wanted to just test some supplemental resources, teach your students what open educational resources are and encourage them to find and share them with each other and so on. And then one of the common concerns, and so we want to make sure that we're cognizant because we hear them all the time. One of the common concerns about use of OER or finding and using for the course is the quality of the resource. And in that conversation, which is great, is not different from the quality of any resource that you would choose for your course. So I just want to share with you this CRAP model, which is a great name for a great model. Was started out in the University of Chico in California. And it's just a way to think about resources, but I've adapted it a little bit with their permission. So I checked in and it is an open resource. So criteria for choosing a quality resource of any kind, including OER. Is that resource relevant for the learning outcomes? Is the resource accessible for learners with disabilities? And this is also a big conversation we're having in the shift to digital teaching for those who had taught in person prior. So is it set up correctly for hearing, sight, assistive technology, mobility, cognitive differences? Access to a resource also includes whether or not the student has internet and device access. So if we're choosing a lot of very high media, large-scale video resources, do our students have access? So in the CRAP model, is the resource current, relevant? Is the resource accurate? Is it, Who authored it is a question. So is it someone that is known in their field? Is the resource fit for purpose? So that's the P. At the right level for learners. And we know that our college level learners are sometimes left out of the mix when university textbooks and textbooks oriented to university learners are used. And then a couple of extras. Do you have permission to share it? Do you have the right copyright? Is fair use or copy or access copyright helping you to be able to share this resource? And then cost, knowing that the cost will become even more of an issue for students. And as I say, Sean is going to talk about adaptability. Can your students modify the resource? So kind of adding these quality questions into your review of whether or not a resource is good for your course is a great conversation to have when looking for open resources. And then a secondary conversation, but really should be on the front burner given our times, especially Black Lives Matter movement and other things that are happening around our Indigenous people here in Canada. Whenever possible, diversity. So what do the learners already know? Often we build our courses and decide on our resources well in advance of ever meeting the group of learners we're going to teach. Do they need beginner level resources? Perhaps something more advanced? Can we create a spectrum by using open educational resources? Who is represented in your resources? So culturally diverse authors, people of color, video and images, whose knowledge is being promoted as the most expert. And I know that when I look in a lot of textbooks at Cambridge College, they're very white and very Western, and we're trying to shift that through the use of open educational resources. And then again, this focus on our conversation about Indigenous authors, their perspectives, their ways of knowing in partnership with our Indigenous student groups, and often in all our colleges we have Indigenous student services as well. So leaning on them to ask questions. How can we create more diverse resources? Knowing that inclusion is not enough. How might you center marginalized learners and experts? And then textbook versus smaller scale. There can be lots of diversity in using smaller scale resources, creating a collection rather than a major textbook. So that's my chat just about how we select resources, some things to think about with respect to making quality choices, and then finding ways to add diversity to those resources. And Paula is going to take us through a tour on how to add places to look when looking for OER.
Wonderful, and thank you, Jenny. And I realized that I forgot to turn on my video at the front end too. So hi, everybody. So hopefully by now, after going through Tricia's part and Jenny's part, you're all excited about the potential of using some open educational resources. And often, when people think about OER, they often their brain goes first to textbooks. But just as Jenny was explaining, OER can be so many different things. It can be images, videos, case studies, infographics, simulations, even supplementary materials. So this image on your screen right now really shows that there's lots out there. This image is actually slightly old. It's from 2016, and already there were 1.6 billion works out there that were openly licensed. So there's lots of stuff out there, and what I'd like to do now is take you on a tour of a few different places you can look. So I'm going to have to share my screen in a different way so I can take you on this tour. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I'll just wait a second. I might turn off my video to see if I can get some quicker access here. And okay. Wow. Okay. All right. So I'm hoping you can all see my screen.
Looking good.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. That's great. So the next, just so you know, the next slide that you will see, and you have access to all of these slides. Jenny put the link in the chat. Has lots of links that you can go and explore on your own later. And so I just want to take you on a tour of a couple of places to start. The first place is eCampus Open Library. So actually I have the tab open here. And this is where you can go and start a search. So Jenny said sometimes you can just jump on Google and start to search there. Absolutely. But if you know you're looking for more textbook-oriented resources, this is a place you can start. So I'm going to show you what a search would look like. So I'm going to look up business fundamentals, and you get all kinds of hits. Now, I will say for more highly specialized areas, there may not be as many things out there, but as that image showed you, that OER repositories are continually growing. So this is what your results would look like. So I'm going to choose this one here, Fundamentals of Business, the Canadian edition. I'm going to click on that to see find. The interesting thing about this book actually is it's an adaptation of another textbook, which was an American textbook, and this one, business faculty from Ontario colleges and eCampus program managers came together to make a Canadian edition where they put in Canadian examples, etc. So this is a beautiful example of the power of open, really, that you can customize something for your students. So what you'll find when you're looking in this eCampus library is, so you'll see that the license here, you can click for more information about the license. You can get this resource in many different formats. Okay? Your students can read it online. They can download a PDF copy, but you can also order print copies. So although OER is largely based digital environment, some students still appreciate being able to print. And the nice thing about OER is you're not going against any copyright issues by printing it. So then as you scroll down, there's lots of additional information here about when it's published, some of the other information. The part I like a lot is under additional resources. Many of these textbooks have some supplementary resources that are shared. So there are some slides, some essay questions, a test bank, and this is amazing. If these are there, this is amazing. Some of these you'll find when you click on them, you don't automatically get access to all of the test questions. You get prompted to email somebody to request the test questions, which makes sense because this is a public website. And all the students could go and find those test questions. So anyways, but look to see whether the resource that you're exploring has additional resources. The other thing I want to show you is that many of the open repositories out there have initiated a review process where people can give peer reviews. So this one has 2 different reviews. You can scroll through the different reviews here. And this goes back to what Jenny was talking about in terms of quality. You know, sometimes it's nice to see if somebody else has reviewed it. You do your own review on your own, of course, but this is nice to add into that review process for yourself. So that's just one little tour of eCampus Ontario. The next one I have to show you is BC Campus, another open textbook library. The thing about OERs, there's not a one-stop shop. There's not one place to go where you'll find everything. So this is another open textbook library. There will be some overlap between the eCampus Ontario one and this BC Campus one, but there will also be some unique items in each. So just like, you know, if you're going to shop for a pair of shoes, you can't go to one store and find every possible pair of shoes that you on the face of the earth. You might have to go to different stores to find that. So I just want to show you how this search is, there are lots of similarities, but there's some unique features as well. So I'm going to search this library for anatomy and physiology. And I have to push the search button. And here I go. I get some hits. the first thing I really love is these green buttons here immediately show you that, okay, so this first open textbook here has some reviews. There's a list of who has adopted this textbook. It's listed as an accessible resource, so it has to meet certain standards to be accessible, and there are supplementary materials connected. So immediately I'm interested in checking this out if I'm an anatomy and physiology person. As you scroll down, you can see that the different hits, some don't have any of those green buttons, but it allows for a quick scan of the ones you might want to open. So I'm going to open this one and just show you a couple of quick things. So the layout here looks different than eCampus, but there's a lot of very similar information. So over on the right-hand side, you can get readable forms of this book, and then editable forms if you want to take part of it, all of it, and adapt it. Because this, again, as you can see, has an open license that allows for you to adapt it and remix it. What I also want to show you at the bottom is, well, I guess these textbooks aren't completely associated with anatomy and physiology, but it reminds me to tell you that, sometimes you might want one of these particular chapters from this book, one or two, and then from another textbook you take another couple of chapters, or even little parts of the chapter. So don't forget to take a look in the book and look at the chapter items. Don't just stop at your investigation at the title. Okay, so I'm moving on. I'm going to go back to, just so that we can, come back to the original slideshow. I've got just a couple more things I want to show you. I'm not going to take you too much on a tour through the OER by discipline, but I want you to know that this is something that you might enjoy exploring on your own. When you click on Read Book, which I will. Okay, well, it's thinking about going there. I'll click again, but yeah, it's working and it will get there. It's got this wonderful list of all of the different disciplines, math, business, architecture, biology, chemistry, all of these different disciplines. And you can, oh, there we go. So you have to click on the content here, and then you come down and you find your area. So maybe, law and criminal justice. And then there are even some subcategories in this area. So the nice thing about this discipline is it contains some other resources that didn't fit the criteria for that BC Commons. So this is linked with BC Campus as well. So that the repository I just showed you with the anatomy and physiology textbook, that's based mainly on textbooks. This directory has all kinds of additional content in there that isn't applicable for the textbook library. So they really complement each other. So this might be a place that you'd like to start exploring. And then the last place I want to just show you quickly is what we call sort of a larger OER repository. And this has a little bit of everything. If you're looking for simulations or case studies or lesson plans or there are lots of different material types, resource types. So let's say I'm looking for, my background's back, so let's say I'm looking for something on the microscope. What I like about this kind of repository is there are lots of filters you can use for advanced search functions. So maybe I want to choose college upper division, and then I do a search there. What I love here on the left-hand side is you can further refine this search by material type. So maybe I'm looking for something specifically I can use in the lab. Maybe I'm looking for an interactive or lecture notes or whatever, but you can filter it this way. And so this one here is a resource that has interactive simulations, and then there's a lab in there as well. So there's lots of opportunity there. Okay, so I'm going to just come back to this main slide here just to show you. I'm not going to take you to this. The Learning Portal is, if you've never been there, a wonderful website put together by Ontario College Libraries. that has so much information, but there's an OER toolkit. And in the toolkit, you can look at a list of all kinds of additional repositories. So if you're looking for images or different types of media or other larger OER repositories, that's where you can go. If you want to, I've given you some starter places here, but you can really go to, find some additional places to go. So I guess I just wanted to, finish my little section by now I can go into present mode and probably look really a lot nicer for you guys. But just to remind you, so I've got an image here on the left of this viewing scope or tower view or whatever you want to call them. And this is sort of how I feel when I'm going to look for OERs, that, you've got to find a place and you go and look, and, there's lots out there in the background. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not a one-stop shop. So if you can't find something in one repository, go to the next one. So the image in the middle is just is supposed to represent, go to another repository. Try looking there. And then this last image here with multiple different viewers really just is to remind me to suggest that even within the same repository, you can use different search strategies. So instead of, let's say I teach biotech, instead of using the big name of your course, break it down and use some of the keywords that you use in your weekly outcomes, just like Jenny was suggesting. But use those search strategies when you're out there digging around, exploring what you can find. I put a link here for you to investigate at another time if you like. It's just a wonderful 3-minute refresher on some search strategies. So how to effectively use keywords, and then a reminder of those Boolean operators we probably all learned about a long time ago and maybe don't use as effectively as we can in our searching. When you use words like and, or, and not, it can really help streamline your exploration. So I think now I need to stop my sharing so that I can pass this on to Shauna.
Thanks so much, Paula. Hi, everyone. I thought it was really important to just take a moment to talk about one of the benefits that I see as really important in moving your teaching practice to open. And that's really that collaboration that happens. It really provides you with the opportunity to reach out and share thoughts and ideas and resources. And as I think Jenny mentioned in the chat just a minute ago, one of the ways that you can do this is really to start with your institution's library. Your librarians have a lot of resources and skills and knowledge about, kind of supporting your move into open. And so it's really good to kind of reach out to them. As well, if you haven't checked out the Ontario Extend, which is eCampus Ontario's professional learning program, I really encourage you to do so. There's a module specifically on curation, which explores ways for us as faculty and facilitators to create engaging and interactive course materials. And I'll just actually share my screen in a minute, and I can kind of show you what this looks like. So here's that first link, and that is really the just the overview of the Curator module, and it's such an excellent resource and something that people can go back to multiple times because it's very succinct and has all the information you need to know about creating kind of an open practice. As well as part of that module with eCampus Ontario, there's this lovely Padlet that was created, and they call it Curation as Creation. And you can see that there has been quite a few people that have contributed to this. And so, it's really looking for resources that fit within your own discipline, and then based on what you have found, you can share this as well. And all of these links too are in the presentation that we have sent out. So another place that you can go to get involved in the community is through Rebus. So Rebus is an online community space for OER, And in particular, the community marketplace is a spot where you can see a lot of open projects that are in development, and you can even post your ideas for future projects. So if I go there, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these sites, but please feel free to peruse them later if you have the links in the presentation. So if you go to Get Involved, you can see the contributor marketplace, and you can see some conversations are already happening about some of the projects that are in process. And interestingly for me, I teach corporate finance, so I saw this yesterday. So it's something that I would like to check out, even though it looks like this started in July. I know that this was also mentioned by Paula, and I'm so grateful that she showed where you can see the reviews that have happened for open textbooks within the eCampus library. But it's really just another opportunity for you to contribute and collaborate and look at reviewing open textbooks. So you can do that through eCampus Ontario, and here's the direct link, as well as BC Campus. They're always looking for reviewers for the open textbooks that are included in their library. And lastly, I know that this was mentioned, the OER Toolkit, and I'm sorry, I know there's lots of links here. So like I said, please feel free to go check these out later. The Learning Portal Toolkit is phenomenal. And if you go to the main page, it gives you some areas to focus on. And obviously for me, it was the collaboration piece. And what I love about it is if you go down, you'll see this little area called How to Connect. And so it gives you a bunch of links here to some different listservs and other ways to connect with folks either in Canada or internationally to discuss OER and share kind of ideas for your open practice. So there's lots of ways to get involved. And that kind of leads me into my next slide, which is around the opportunity to involve your students. And I loved this kind of definition for open pedagogy from the University of Texas Arlington's library. And it says, open pedagogy is the practice of engaging with students as creators of information rather than simply be consumers of it. And this slide was really inspired by an open textbook from Boise State University called An OER Field Guide for Academic Librarians. This was released in 2018. And in particular, I have focused on Chapter 11, which is student-driven OER. And so I've given you the link here to the textbook chapter, but it's really worth a read. And it talks about, some of the benefits of, collaborating and engaging with our students with open resources. And, to start, I do want to call out Brandon, who's joining us as a participant, because I went to his session at TESS, the TESS conference, and he was sharing his research on barriers to use for faculty with OER. And so he talked a lot about, time. Time is a huge constraint, especially right now with the move to online for everyone. And, trying to find resources that fit your course. And so I think, an excellent way to really overcome these barriers are, to involve students in that process, right? So one of the major benefits, obviously, is that it builds awareness amongst the student population about OERs and aids in that creation and development. So, creating more resources that can be shared globally. From a student perspective, it really supports their understanding because, they're able to create resources written by students for students, and so it's, increasing that opportunity, to learn from others instead of just getting kind of the one voice. It creates a culture of learning, having students kind of create in this way, create openly, really kind of changes their learning environment, changes their process and their practice. And so, as we encourage them to share more openly, this becomes the way that they do things. And, they're kind of used to doing this sometimes in their social environment, right? So, why not extend this to the learning environment? It also allows them to build skills. And I'll show you in a minute, Wiki Education did a research study on this. And they found that when students engaged in creating content through wikis, that they were building, critical thinking skills and digital literacy skills, and being able to work in groups and collaborate. And lastly, it allows students to demonstrate what they have learned or what they have gained throughout this experience. For my students in my class, I teach the class as if it's a toolkit or a tool belt, and I say to them, think about all of the tools that you're adding to that belt that you can now go and show a future employer. And so I encourage them, all of the artifacts that they create within our course, to add them to their e-portfolio. And it was really interesting because David Wiley talked about, kind of traditional assessments being disposable assignments, assignments that are marked for a grade. They're seen by a professor, but they're never shared beyond that. And so there's no value being added to the world, or that audience is not able to take that value out of that assignment. So it's really important that we look at the learning environment as a collaboration, and it being reciprocal between the students and teachers, so that we're learning from each other. So with that in mind, I did provide a few examples, and again, I know we're running out of time, and I do want to leave some time for questions, but I've tried to organize them into kind of two categories here. So one being where students have been hired through either work study or research projects or work placements, and then where students have been involved in OER creation or revision through a course assignment or within the course with the instructor. And so I attended, again, a really wonderful a webinar at TESS by the Ontario Tech University in their OER lab, where they are hiring students, and it's basically a student-driven lab where students are working on, revising open resources for students that are in that institution, and obviously the greater community. Similarly, at the University of Edinburgh, they hire students as open curators. eCampus Ontario has their Student Experience Design Lab, where students apply, they become part of this research and innovation lab, and they take problems or issues that need to be solved to really create a better experience for students in post-secondary environments. And so you can go to the website there and take a look at some of the projects that they have worked on, and everything that they do is shared openly. And then on the course assignments or course page, I really do encourage you to take a look at the Wiki Education website, and in particular that research study that they have done, because it really does provide some great information and results on how students have responded to this opportunity to have this public voice and to share their work with a greater audience. And so if you go to the link and go to the survey results, it talks a lot about what this has done for their digital literacy skills and their, their research skills. If you want to take a look at, this is one obviously that's a little bit more near and dear to me. When I was a student at UBC, I was involved in some projects within my courses in creating content for the UBC Wiki. So University of British Columbia has their own wiki that they allow students to collaborate and contribute to. So I did give you a link there as another example. And the last two links here, Open Pedagogy Network and Open Education Group, sorry for all the links, but I'm pretty link happy, provide some wonderful examples of how students have been involved in these wonderful open education projects within their courses. And in particular, I'll take you to the second, oh dear, I don't know what has happened there. I cannot get to the link. It was just working this morning. Maybe I've done something funny. Okay, well, I will try it later, but that is an excellent website. I don't know why. I can Google it after and share it in the chat. But the Open Education Group provides some wonderful resources on how students have, maybe not contributed into an entire book, maybe they have revised portions or, added chapters because of emerging trends in that area, or maybe they've created ancillary resources. So maybe you have an assignment where students create banks or manuals or something else that can, kind of support that education resource. Last kind of link here I did, and this was me kind of going down a rabbit hole and trying to find as many examples as I possibly could of students co-creating within a course. And so there's some more links here if you want to check out, and I'll try to keep populating. This is editable, so if you find some examples, please feel free to add to it as well. And if you're really interested in this idea of engaging your students in this way, Rebus Foundation has created an open textbook, and then they've called it a guide to making open textbooks with students. So, you know, how you would go about that process and what that would look like. And so if you go into the chapter content, you can see that it gives you some ideas and some sample assignments. But that's really it for me. So I'm going to just open it up, and hopefully we have left a bit of time for questions. Please feel free to check any of these links out and reach out to me if you have any questions or if there is anything that you would like to learn more about. You can type your questions in the chat, or if you would like to turn your mic on and ask the questions, that's fine too. I know a lot of you talked about using OER in your courses, so if you want to share how that has gone for you.
It sounds like we may have we're having to head off here to other meetings.
Yes. Well, my email is on that first slide, as is the other presenter, so feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shauna. Louisa, is there anything that you need to add before we get going?
No, that's everything. So I think what I'll do is I'll stop the recording right here. But great job. That was a really jam-packed session of great information. So I'm going to share the video and your Google Docs with my colleagues. I was hoping some of them would be able to attend today, but I guess, you know, there's always conflicts, right? But great job.
Thanks.